We went to an urgent care facility and they wouldn't even let her get out of my truck because she was seizing in the back, so they called an ambulance immediately.
Doctors at Fairfax Inova and Johns Hopkins diagnosed her with a rare neurological disorder called dystonia. They think it was caused by a severe reaction to the flu shot. She now has difficulty speaking, walking, even eating. During our interview, she had several seizures. The effects are irreversible.
Symptoms will get worse if I use my voice or walk when the brain signals are misfiring.
Desiree reported her health problems to the Food and Drug Administration, thinking there might have been something wrong with her vaccine. We also contacted the FDA, and we were told they found no problems with the particular lot of flu vaccines that Desiree received, and the agency has not received any other reports of adverse effects from this lot. Health experts stress that overall, extreme side effects are rare.
The flu shot is very safe for the majority of the public, and as I said before, your heart really goes out to someone who experiences this sort of thing, thinking that they're doing something great for their wellness and their general health. But unfortunately, it does happen in extremely rare cases.
For Desiree, she just happened to be one of those rare cases.
I don't want this happening to anyone else.
Now let's explore the duality that is Fox News. First, the host is going to tell us about all the people who've died of the swine flu and how contagious it is and how it's going to be a pandemic. That's the hype. But what we're really interested in here is the judge who's going to tell us about the law that Massachusetts is trying to put into place, as well as many other states across the country, that you can be forcibly vaccinated or quarantined.
The H1N1 virus has made thousands of people across the country sick. Many have died, and some worrying that it could grow into a full-blown pandemic. Well, one state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is preparing for that with a very controversial bill. Massachusetts proposing legislation that would allow police to forcefully quarantine residents and even impose martial law without a warrant. Could that possibly be constitutional? We've called in Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano.
Hey, Steve.
So, because apparently they're worried that swine flu is a public safety issue, they're talking about a law where the police can knock on your door.
Right.
Or not necessarily knock on your door, just go in and essentially quarantine you.
Well, they're doing more than talking about a law. The state of Massachusetts, both houses of the legislature have enacted this law, and once Governor Deval Patrick signs it, and he says that he will, it'll become the law, and it will allow him to declare an emergency. And once he declares an emergency, he can authorize non-healthcare licensed personnel, read that to mean police,
sure,
to vaccinate people against their will. Now, can they force adults to take vaccination? No. They will incarcerate adults without a trial, without charges, without even a search warrant, who refuse to be vaccinated. This is what the statute authorizes. It also authorizes the statute also authorizes the police to remove children from adults, vaccinate them against the will of the child and the will of the parents.
This is so troubling on so many different levels. I mean, first of all, you think, wait a minute, they've got a great big list with everybody who got a flu shot's name on it?
Interesting you say that. There is not a clause in this statute that requires you to report a neighbor, but the government will encourage people to do it. Look, this is the reason why we have federal judges, because federal judges in Massachusetts will have to take this statute and compare it to the Constitution. And the Constitution says the police can't break into your home, and the police can't take your children away from you, and parents decide what medication the children get, not the government.
Man, the first time, if this were to happen, and the first time some cop goes in and gives some kid a shot, it's going to hit the fan.
Yes, it will, and the state of Massachusetts will be sorry it enacted this, because people will revolt against it.
All right, Judge Andrew Napolitano, thank you very much.
Good to be with you, Steve.
Demand the right from your federal and state legislators to self-shield. That means, in the event that a pandemic is called, you now have two choices. One, take the vaccine. Bad choice. Two, go into a detention center, a jail, or an incarceration center. Really bad choice. I want you to have a third choice, And the choice is no thanks. Skip the vaccine, skip the incarceration. I will go home and I will spend the period of quarantine in my own home. That's called self-shielding. So you better start laying up a supply of water. Glass bottles are best, of course. You better start laying up a supply of food and of fuel and of the vitamins and of the drugs that you need. And you better do it now. But if you don't demand the right to self-shield, that's all meaningless.
The president now declaring the H1N1 outbreak a national emergency. The White House says the president signed this proclamation last night. It will allow medical officials to bypass certain federal requirements.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution, and I was deeply concerned about it.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Now, here are the aims for the United States. 1, greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. 2, higher and then much higher taxes. 3, an increasingly unbalanced budget despite the higher taxes. 4, wild inflation of our currency. 5, government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. 6, greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. This is to be accompanied, naturally and automatically, by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. 7, far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. 8, the steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education. 9, a constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare, the beauties and the absolute necessity of peace. Peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government, which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself. Brush the insider's dust out of your eyes, my friends, and the communist soap suds out of your brain, and ask yourselves in all honesty, what on earth is wrong with the United States simply minding its own business, or with having its foreign policy function primarily for the safety and benefit of the American people, which is exactly what we had done for the first 140 years of our existence as a nation, to the incredible advantage of ourselves and everybody else. Everybody, that is, except a numerically small clique of power-lusting conspirators who had somehow inflicted themselves on a gullible world.
That's what this liberal would be all about. This liberal will be all about socializing, would be about basically taking over and the government running all of your companies.